Synapse Energy Economics, a small consulting firm, Cambridge, Massachusetts. We have about 25 employees. We do research and analytical studies in the energy and environmental areas, and most often it's energy and environment together is what we do. People have asked questions in the past about why we have the windmills on this slide. This is our standard background slide for our presentations. And we have no windmill companies, and we're not invested in windmill companies. We're not trying to promote windmills. At the time that this background slide was adopted a few years ago, we thought it represented a forward-thinking way of looking at energy. But there's been debate. There's always debate at Synapse. And so now we're trying to debate whether we need to revise this. And some people are saying, well, we're already covered because behind those windmills there's a sun rising. So that again shows another innovative way that perhaps we can deal with energy. And we just like to, point these things out as we go along. Is this the next one? People have mentioned the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the federal regulator. They have issued a transmission NOPR, a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and I picked out one paragraph that is of particular significance. Heather alluded to it. I know folks at the ISO are paying attention to this. The thing that's a little different here is requiring transmission providers, or the people responsible for doing transmission planning, which in our region is ISO New England, as well as the stakeholders that the ISO works with, to identify public policy requirements and somehow include those public policy goals and rules, or whatever they are, in the planning process. It's a simple statement. It's a very difficult thing to actually implement. This is a slide showing recent trends in a variety of things. Energy use, the top line is electricity. Now, energy intensity is kind of your overall efficiency of producing goods in your economy. How much energy does it take to produce all the widgets, heat all the homes, run all the businesses in the United States? And if you're looking at electricity, it would be electricity energy intensity, the gross domestic product divided by the gross amount of electric energy used. There's also an all energy down there at the bottom. If we go to the next slide, we have another way that we have analyzed this same information is to look at historic U.S. energy intensity. And there's the top purple line of electricity, and you can see, and then there's the black line showing all energy. The thing that's significant here is you can see that the all energy graph has been on a pretty steady decline. That means that as a society, as a country, we are using less and less energy on an annual basis to produce everything we need. And that's a really good thing, because what that does is help insulate us from energy price shocks. If you run a business, this may not be appropriate, let's say you're making something that uses a lot of electricity, a steel business, and if your energy input to your ton of steel is 20% of your cost, and there's a competitor in another country or another part of the United States whose energy input is only 10% of his costs or her costs, when energy prices double, the person who has a 20% component is really hurt, whereas the person who has a 10% component is still suffering, but they have a competitive advantage against the person who has a 40%. That competitive advantage flows through in many aspects of the economy. The overall efficiency of our homes, because they're not as efficient as they could be, means you have to pay people more money so they can afford to heat and cool their homes. If our transportation system is not as efficient as it could be, we're paying people more in wages so they can afford the gas, so they can drive to work and get things done. So anything that reduces energy intensity is generally a good thing. There's, with all general maxims, there are exceptions and caveats. But in general, you want to be driving down the amount of energy it takes to do the things that we're doing. And it's kind of just been starting in the electricity industry maybe around 1990 or so. It's a slower impact here. Historically, we were using more and more electricity every year. If you look at the graph from 49 to 69, 79, that's because we were electrifying our economy. Electricity was being first provided in more and more places, and then more things that we do require electricity. So this is significant that this has started on a downward trend. At the end, I hope to be able to put up a graph that shows the U.S. relative position to a lot of people in the rest of the world. So what does that mean for us here in New England? This is a chart showing actual net energy for load. Now, this is similar to a chart Carolyn showed, which was peak energy demand. But peak energy demand is the total quantity of power on peak. This is an energy graph which is showing annual energy consumption for a whole year. They're slightly different measurements. The impact of energy efficiency is slightly greater on total annual energy consumption than it is on peak demand, but energy efficiency contributes to both lowering overall energy and lowering peak demand. And what is significant here is what's happened in the last several years. You can see the downward actual use of energy. Now, one of the questions that came to our mind is, well, how much of this was because of the economic recession? So we took these same data points and took out the recession years. There was a recession, if you notice, back in the 1990s, where you had that similar dip for several years, and then energy use kind of bounces back. So we wanted to try to normalize this as if we never had an economic recession to see what the constant trend is. And again, when you do this trend analysis over 10-year periods, each of these lines is representing a 10-year period. You can see this line is steeper than this line, and obviously this line is the lowest slope of all. So even when you try to correct for economic recessions, we're still showing a downward approaching trend in electrical energy consumption on a year-to-year basis. Or at least, I would say, maybe it's a leveling off of a growth trend. That's the way to describe this. The growth trend is starting to level off, and that can have very important implications for what we need to build for 20 years in the future. Where are our loads going to be? What are those loads going to be? What kind of transmission infrastructure do we need to develop so that the power sources can get to the loads? And if you make the wrong choices, you might invest in a transmission line that isn't really providing you what you need 10 or 15 years in the future.